On a cold winter evening, a solitary man spotted two wolves silently walking along the edge of his property. Rather than baring their teeth or growling, these majestic yet intimidating creatures seemed to be in distress, scratching at his door as though begging for shelter. When he finally opened the door, he had no idea just how life-changing that moment would be or what these frozen wolves truly wanted. Why had they chosen the warmth of his home over the wild, harsh nature that was supposed to be their domain? Before we dive in, let us know where you're tuning in from. We're always curious to hear from the best listeners of all, the ones who share in these stories. Now let's get started. Jack Thompson wasn't new to harsh winters, having spent his entire life in the remote countryside near Wyoming. He was no stranger to freezing temperatures and the howling winds that came with them. His log cabin, sturdy and weathered by many years, stood as a testament to surviving in one of the harshest climates in the world. Yet, despite his wealth of experience, nothing could have prepared him for what he encountered on that snowy evening. It started as an ordinary day, or at least as ordinary as it could be in the dead of winter. Jack had chopped enough firewood to last through the night and checked on his small vegetable greenhouse, which stayed alive through the biting cold thanks to a wood stove. As twilight settled in, Jack retreated into his cozy room, satisfied that he would spend the long dark hours by the crackling fire, a warm mug of tea in hand. The wind howled outside, but within the sturdy walls of his home, all was calm. Yet, as Jack settled into the quiet, a soft scraping sound at the front door pierced the stillness of the night. At first, he thought it was just another stray animal, perhaps a raccoon or a wild dog roaming around the property. But when the whimpering continued, an unsettling feeling crept over him. Peering through the frosted window, Jack's breath caught in his throat. There, standing at the door, were two emaciated wolves. Their fur was matted and dusted with snow, and their breath formed clouds in the bitter cold. They were not acting like wild predators. There was no aggression, no warning growl. Instead, they stood there, eyes wide with desperation, trembling from the cold. Jack's pulse quickened. He knew the dangers of wild animals, especially wolves, but these creatures didn't seem like the kind of threat he had expected. They were, in fact, asking for help, though they did so in a way that almost seemed human. Against his better judgment, Jack grabbed a flashlight and cautiously opened the door. The larger wolf hesitated at first but then took a slow, hesitant step forward. Its glowing eyes locked with Jack's, not with malice but with a quiet plea. For a moment, Jack stood frozen. The wolves, usually symbols of strength and ferocity, were now vulnerable, desperate for warmth, for refuge. His heart softened. What could have brought them here, he wondered. Why come to a man for help? Yet, before he could talk himself out of it, he opened the door wider, inviting them in. The two wolves exchanged a brief glance before they cautiously entered. They padded softly across the threshold, their feet leaving faint prints in the snow that had been blown inside with them. Once they were in the warmth of the house, Jack quickly closed the door, shutting out the howling wind. Jack watched, still unsure of what to do. The wolves paused, their breath loud in the silence of the cabin. But as the warmth began to sink into their frozen bodies, they relaxed, cautiously exploring the unfamiliar space. One of them, smaller and with a slight limp, slowly limped to the corner, sniffing the area. Jack noted how thin it was. The other, a larger wolf, stood still, observing its surroundings before finally lowering its head. For a few moments, Jack just watched. The wolves, for all their wildness, looked tired, exhausted even. Their bodies trembled not with aggression but with exhaustion. The larger one, his breath steady, kept an eye on Jack as if silently assessing whether this human posed any threat. Poor things, Jack murmured softly to himself. They were weak, hungry, and he had no idea what had driven them to seek refuge in a place like his. He moved toward his small pantry and pulled out some leftover meat. Was it wise to feed them raw food? The question lingered in his mind, but as he saw the wolves' pleading gazes, he set the thought aside. He placed the plate of meat on the floor, backing up slowly to give them space. At first, the smaller wolf hesitated, sniffing at the food carefully, but then hunger took over. The larger wolf joined in, and together they devoured the meat within moments. Their hungry eyes met Jack's again, showing a mix of relief and gratitude. Jack was taken aback by how quickly they trusted him, even as wild as they were. The rawness of their desperation was something he could understand. "You were starving out there, weren't you?" Jack whispered, his heart heavy with sympathy. After they finished eating, the wolves seemed to calm down. They moved to the blankets Jack had placed on the floor by the fire. The larger wolf lowered itself next to its companion, curling protectively around the smaller wolf, keeping it warm. Jack felt his chest tighten at the sight. He had always admired wolves for their strength, but seeing them like this, vulnerable and still, was an entirely different experience. Sitting back in his chair, Jack stared at the wolves, his heart full of conflicting emotions. He had heard stories of wolves, of their fierce loyalty to their pack, but he had never seen it in person. The way these two moved together, how they shared warmth and silence, reminded him of something more human, more intimate. The rest of the evening passed in a quiet rhythm. Jack tended to the fire while the wolves rested, occasionally stirring as they listened to the wind outside. Jack felt the warmth of the hearth, but also a new warmth in his heart, one that grew each time he glanced at the two animals resting in his home. The next morning, the cabin was quiet except for the crackling of the fire. Jack had checked on the wolves before heading out to gather more firewood. As the days went on, he found himself growing more attached to the two wolves. They seemed to grow more comfortable with him, watching him with those intelligent, glowing eyes. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that their bond was more than just an act of survival. They were family, each one had its own place in the pack, and Jack felt an odd sense of duty to protect them even if they were wild. That first night I didn't sleep much. Every time the fire popped or the wind rattled the window shutters, I'd glance toward the corner where they lay. The larger wolf didn't close its eyes for long, always lifting its head to check on me or the door. The smaller one slept deeply, exhaustion having claimed it the moment it had settled on the blankets. By morning, the world outside was buried under a fresh layer of snow. The mountains looked like they'd been dipped in sugar, and the air was sharp and bright. I put on my coat and stepped outside to split more wood, but I couldn't shake the thought of what had driven them here. Over the next couple of days, we fell into a strange routine. I'd feed them, small portions at first, just enough to get their strength back. The larger wolf began relaxing its constant guard, though it never strayed far from the smaller one. I started to notice the subtle ways they communicated. A low rumble, a tilt of the head, even the way their bodies leaned together. They were more than just two animals surviving side by side. They were family. One afternoon, while I was repairing a draft near the cabin door, I heard the crunch of tires in the snow. A white truck pulled into the clearing, and out stepped a woman in a heavy winter parka, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Jack Thompson," she called. "That's me," I said, brushing snow off my gloves. "I'm Kate Reynolds. I work with the Montana Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. I heard from a ranger friend that you might have a couple of wolves here in rough shape." I nodded slowly. "They showed up a few nights ago. Haven't left since." Kate stepped closer, her gaze moving toward the window where the wolves now stood watching. Her expression softened. "They're lucky they found you. That smaller one looks like it's been injured for a while. If you'll let me, I can help get them back to full health." We agreed that she'd check in regularly, bringing supplies and advice on their care. Kate had a way with them, patient, calm, never forcing herself into their space. Under her guidance, I adjusted their diet, added vitamins to their meals, and learned how to clean and wrap the smaller wolf's injured leg. Weeks passed. The wolves grew stronger. The limp became less noticeable, and their coats regained their thick, healthy sheen. The larger one still kept a protective stance, but there was a trust forming between us now. I could move around the cabin without their eyes following my every step. But with their health returning, the truth I'd been avoiding came into sharper focus. They didn't belong here. One morning, Kate arrived with news. "Jack," she said, brushing snow from her hood, "I think it's almost time. The rehab center can monitor them for a couple more weeks, make sure they're fully ready, and then we'll release them." Her words hit harder than I expected. I'd known this day would come, but knowing and feeling are two different things. When the day finally arrived, it felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. Kate's truck pulled up early, steam rising from the exhaust in the freezing air. We loaded the wolves into a large, padded enclosure in the back, the larger one stepping in first as if to reassure the smaller it was safe. The drive to the release site was quiet. Through the slats in the enclosure, I could see the smaller wolf's ears flicking at every sound, the larger one staying pressed close. When we reached the edge of the protected wilderness, Kate opened the enclosure door. For a moment, neither wolf moved. Then the larger one stepped out onto the snow, nose lifted to the wind. The smaller followed, pausing to look back at us. They didn't bolt. They walked slowly at first, side by side, until the trees began to close around them. The larger wolf stopped once, glancing over its shoulder, eyes meeting mine in a way I'll never forget. Then they were gone, two shadows melting into the white silence of the forest. Kate stood beside me for a while, neither of us speaking. Finally she said, "They'll be okay, Jack." "I know," I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Back at the cabin, the quiet was deafening at first. No soft paws on the floorboards, no sound of their breathing near the fire. I went back to my old routines, splitting wood, tending the greenhouse, making the long trek to town every couple of weeks. But something in me had shifted. Where I used to see the wilderness as cold and unforgiving, I now saw its balance, its moments of mercy. Those wolves had shown me something about loyalty, about survival, about trust. A month later, Kate sent me photos from the rehab center's trail cameras. The wolves had been spotted together, healthy and strong, roaming deep in the mountains. The smaller one no longer limped. They were thriving, wild and free as they were meant to be. That night, as I sat by the fire, I caught myself smiling. The wind outside howled through the pines, sounding almost like a distant call. And I thought, maybe they remember me too. If this story touched your heart, join our community, subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Speech Balloon, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of this journey stayed with you the most. Your words inspire us to keep sharing stories that bridge the gap between people and the wild. Evergreen Tree, and maybe you have your own story to tell? Share it with us. Who knows, yours might be the next one we bring to life here. Thank you for watching. From pain to power, it starts with you. Blackheart.